Just hours ago, a leaked palace memo exposed Charles's explosive plan, a radical rewrite of royal protocol that would grant Camilla unprecedented power, including co-decision rights on succession matters and a permanent seat beside the throne. Insiders say the document was meant to stay buried until after the next coronation. But Anne read it first, and her fury ignited a chain reaction no one saw coming. What exact clause threatened the future of the crown? Why did Charles risk everything for Camilla now? Palace sources reveal the hidden meeting where the proposal was born and the terrifying reason William was never consulted. This isn't a minor title tweak. This is the move that could split the monarchy in two. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The memo itself was clinical, almost surgical in its wording, cold black ink on cream paper that carried the weight of centuries. Her Majesty the Queen Consort shall exercise joint prerogative in all succession deliberations, with veto authority equal to that of the sovereign. Senior royals who glimpsed those lines froze in place. One aide reportedly whispered it felt like watching the crown crack in real time. Charles had signed it in private, his hand steady, driven by a motivation that had simmered for decades. Camilla's long, painful wait for full status, the years of public scorn, the quiet nights when she wondered if the institution would ever truly embrace her. He wasn't just rewarding loyalty, he was rewriting history to erase the shadow that had haunted them both since the Diana era. Aides close to the king had seen the early warning signs, late-night whispers in the corridors of Balmoral, sudden changes to briefing schedules, Camilla's growing presence at confidential meetings, but they looked the other way, convinced the king's quiet determination would stay contained. Anne, though, refused to play by those rules. The moment the document landed in her hands, slipped to her by a loyal staffer who could no longer stay silent, her reaction was volcanic. She didn't call for a meeting, she stormed through the palace corridors, voice low but trembling with rage, demanding answers that no one dared give. "This isn't protection," she reportedly snarled to an inner circle advisor. "This is surrender." The betrayal cut deeper because William had been kept completely in the dark, isolated in his own home at Adelaide Cottage, pacing rooms where the silence felt heavier than any public duty. No call from his father, no briefing from aides, just the sudden realization delivered through the same leaked pages that the future he had prepared for was being reshaped without him. That emotional isolation hit like a gut punch. The young prince who had carried the weight of expectation now staring at a throne that suddenly felt rigged against him. Decades-old tensions that had been papered over with polite smiles and careful press statements were erupting now in brutal clarity. The old guard versus the new, duty versus desire, bloodline versus chosen partner. Every whispered resentment from the past, Camilla's long exile, Anne's fierce defense of tradition, William's careful navigation of his own family fractures, suddenly collided in this single document. And as the hours ticked down, palace insiders began speaking of a secret vote that would change everything. A closed-door gathering where alliances would be tested and loyalties shattered. The air inside those ancient walls grew thick with dread, the throne itself seeming to tremble under the force of what was coming. Yet the real shock came when Anne refused to stay silent, and the one person she turned to next was the last ally anyone expected. Anne read the memo once, then twice, her face hardening into stone. Charles' plan to elevate Camilla would rewrite the rules she had defended her entire life. Insiders describe her storming into a private meeting and declaring, "Over my dead body." What specific clause about Camilla's new powers triggered her most? What private letter from Charles did she quote back at him in fury? Palace leaks now reveal the exact moment Anne decided to fight, and the devastating threat she made if the plan moved forward. The princess who had protected the crown for decades was now ready to break it to save it. The offending lines burned into her memory like acid. The Queen Consort shall hold equal deliberative authority in matters of succession. including the right to propose and block candidates. Those 14 words stripped away the ancient firewall between personal affection and constitutional duty, handing Camilla a lever that could, in theory, steer the line of succession itself. Anne had spent a lifetime in the shadows of protocol, quiet, unflinching, the one royal who never complained, never courted headlines, never asked for more than the burden she was given. Now that same iron loyalty twisted into something sharper, something dangerous. Defiance did not come easily to her. It had to be forced out by betrayal so profound it left no other path. She clutched the folded private letter Charles had sent her months earlier, words meant to soothe after her mother's passing. "You remain the steadfast heart of this family, Anne. Nothing will change that." She read those sentences aloud in the dim antechamber where aides had hastily gathered, her voice low and lethal, turning comfort into accusation. "You promised me nothing would change," she said, eyes locked on her brother. "Yet here you are, handing the keys to the future to someone who was never meant to hold them." The confrontation that followed was not loud in the way tabloids love no shouting matches echoing down marble halls, but it carried a weight that silenced everyone present. Charles sat motionless while Anne paced, each sentence measured, each pause heavy with decades of shared history now fracturing. She spoke of duty not as abstract tradition but as living sacrifice. The years she had swallowed public humiliation for the institution, the private grief she had buried so the monarchy could stand tall. Opposing her own brother tore at her in ways no outsider could fathom. Every word felt like pressing a blade against family ties she had spent a lifetime protecting. Yet the alternative silence while the crown's foundation was quietly undermined was unthinkable. Her voice cracked only once, betraying the toll, the exhaustion of loving the institution more than it had ever loved her back, the loneliness of being the reliable one when everyone else chased spotlight or affection. Still, resolve hardened around the pain. She delivered her ultimatum with chilling calm. If this proposal reached the council table without revision, she would make public her opposition in a way that would force every senior royal to choose sides. The room went cold. No one doubted she meant it. Inside, the war raged on family against institution, brother against sister, love against legacy. Anne felt the fracture lines spreading through her own heart, each one deeper than the last. She had always believed loyalty meant endurance, not rebellion. Now endurance demanded rebellion. The emotional cost mounted with every breath, yet she refused to bend. Palace corridors that had once felt like home now echoed with the ghost of what was coming: division, whispers of abdication threats, the slow unraveling of unity that had held for generations. Anne stood alone in her defiance until a single late-night call changed the battlefield forever. William stared at the same memo for hours, torn between the father he loved and the crown he would one day inherit. Charles's plan for Camilla would reshape the monarchy he was raised to lead. Insiders reveal the sleepless nights, the whispered arguments with Catherine, and the moment he realized siding with Anne might be his only choice. What private fear about Camilla's influence kept him awake? What heartbreaking promise to his children did he make before deciding? The future king who always stood by his father now faced the ultimate betrayal. The document lay open on the desk like an accusation that refused to fade. William traced the lines granting Camilla equal say in succession matters, each phrase carving deeper into the certainty he had once taken for granted. He had always feared this moment, not the throne itself, but the slow erosion of its sacred boundaries. If Camilla held veto power over who could inherit, the monarchy risked becoming a personal domain rather than an enduring institution. The thought haunted him. Future generations judged not by blood or merit, but by favor earned in private chambers. He had supported his father through every storm: public scandals, private grief, the long shadow of loss, because loyalty felt unbreakable. Now that same loyalty collided head-on with the duty he owed the crown, and the children who would one day carry its weight. The contrast tore at him. The public image of seamless unity against the private agony of watching the family fracture under decisions made in secret. Nights blurred into one another. Catherine sat beside him in the dim light of Adelaide Cottage, her hand steady on his while his shook. They spoke in low voices so the children wouldn't hear about legacy, about what kind of monarchy George, Charlotte and Louis would inherit. She didn't push. She listened as he poured out the conflict that had no clean resolution. Love for his father warred with love for his own family's future. "If I stay silent," he finally said, voice cracking, "I'm complicit in changing everything I swore to protect." Catherine's quiet reply cut through the haze. "Then protect it, even if it costs you the closeness you've fought to rebuild." Those words lingered, heavy and irreversible. Before dawn broke, William knelt beside the children's beds, watching their peaceful sleep, and whispered a promise he hoped he could keep, that he would fight so the crown they received would still mean something unbreakable, something worth the burden. The internal war raged on heart against duty, son against heir. Every memory of Charles's pride in him, every shared laugh, every quiet moment of reconciliation after years apart, now felt tainted by this single act of exclusion. William had never wanted to choose sides. He had spent his life trying to heal divides. Yet the memo forced his hand. The moment came without fanfare, a single text sent in the small hours, words chosen with agonizing care. "We need to talk. Properly. I'm with you." He hit send before doubt could pull him back. Reaching out to Anne felt like crossing a line he could never uncross, yet the relief was immediate and shattering. For the first time in weeks, the isolation lifted, replaced by something sharper resolve forged in shared pain. Publicly, the royal family still appeared united, carefully worded statements, synchronized appearances, the familiar mask of composure. Privately, the agony ran unchecked. William carried the weight of knowing he might soon stand against the man who raised him, all to preserve what that man had once taught him mattered most. The fracture lines deepened with every passing day, drawing closer to the precipice no one could ignore. Two royals, two unbreakable vows, but the night they joined forces would ignite the vote no one could stop. Behind locked doors at 2 a.m., the most powerful royals gathered for a vote that would never be recorded. Charles presented his plan for Camilla with quiet confidence. Anne and William sat side by side, faces grim. What coded words did they use to signal their alliance? What shocking ultimatum did Anne deliver if the plan passed? Fresh leaks exposed the exact tally, the stunned silence that followed, and the moment Charles realized his own son had turned against him. The council meant to unify the family had just torn it apart. The meeting had been summoned under the strictest veil of secrecy, no aides, no minutes, no digital trace. Only the core inner circle. Charles at the head of the long oak table, Anne to his left, William directly opposite, a handful of senior blood royals filling the remaining chairs like silent judges. Phones were surrendered at the door. The room itself swept for listening devices twice in the preceding hour. Every participant knew the rules: one voice, one vote, outcome binding and final, yet forever off the official record. Charles opened with measured calm, framing the proposal not as radical overhaul but as necessary evolution. Camilla's co-decision rights would strengthen the monarchy, honor decades of loyalty, ensure stability in uncertain times. His voice never wavered, but those who knew him best caught the faint tremor beneath the surface, the unspoken hope that family would once again rally around his vision. Anne and William had arrived together, a deliberate show of unity that set nerves on edge before a single word was spoken. They used no grand declarations. Instead, they leaned on the quiet codes they had forged in hurried late-night calls. When Charles paused for questions, Anne murmured, "The foundation must hold," her eyes flicking to William. He answered with a single deliberate nod and the reply, "Stone by stone." To outsiders, the exchange sounded innocuous, almost poetic. To those in the room who understood the stakes, it was unmistakable. The alliance was sealed. the line drawn. Charles continued, outlining safeguards and benefits, yet the air thickened with unease. He glanced toward his children more often than usual, searching for the familiar support that had always been there. What he found instead was stone. The vote came without ceremony. One by one, hands rose or stayed down. Charles cast first affirmative, steady, then an negative, unblinking. William followed, his no delivered so quietly it might have been lost if the room hadn't already gone deathly still. The tally ended 5 against, 4 in favour. Historic. Unprecedented. A razor-thin defeat that sliced through generations of deference. Silence swallowed the chamber, thick and suffocating. Charles sat frozen, gaze locked on his son. The realization hit in slow, brutal waves. The boy he had raised, the heir he had groomed, had chosen the institution over the father. William met that stare without flinching, though the cost burned behind his eyes. Anne's face remained impassive, but her knuckles whitened on the table edge. Camilla had not been invited. Charles had insisted her presence would cloud judgment, turn the discussion personal rather than constitutional. Now that absence felt like a wound. The emotional fallout rippled outward in the moments that followed, sharp intakes of breath, averted eyes, the soft scrape of chairs as people shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke for what felt like minutes. Charles finally rose, voice hoarse. So be it. Yet the words carried no finality, only the hollow echo of a man watching his carefully laid plan collapse. Anne delivered her parting ultimatum as the group began to disperse. If any attempt was made to revive the proposal outside this room, she would go public with every detail, forcing the fracture into daylight, where no amount of protocol could mend it. The threat hung like smoke. The vote was cast, but the real battle exploded the moment Camilla learned the truth. Camilla received the news in a single text from Charles. They voted against us. Insiders say she dropped the phone, tears of rage and disbelief streaming down her face. What exact words did she scream into the empty room? How did she confront Charles about William's betrayal? Palace sources reveal the private meltdown, the accusations she hurled at Anne, and the chilling vow she made to fight back. The woman who waited decades for the crown had just been rejected by the 2 royals who mattered most. The message arrived without warning, 3 words that landed like a guillotine. Camilla stood frozen in the quiet of Clarence House, the screen's glow the only light in the room. Then the phone slipped from her fingers, clattering against the hardwood floor. A raw, guttural sound escaped her half-sob, half-roar. No. No. Not after everything. The words tore out louder, echoing off walls that had witnessed her patience, her restraint, her endless swallowing of pride. She collapsed onto the nearest chair, body shaking, hands clawing at the silk of her robe as if she could tear the humiliation away. Decades of enduring public scorn, of standing just outside the circle of acceptance, of believing one day the institution would finally bend gone in a single secret ballot. The tears came hot and furious, not the quiet grief of disappointment, but the wildfire rage of someone who had paid every price only to be denied the reward. Charles arrived within the hour, summoned by her frantic call. The door had barely closed behind him before she rounded on him, voice cracking with betrayal. "Your own son," she spat. "Your heir." He looked you in the eye and said no. Charles tried to reach for her, to offer the comfort that had once soothed her through worse storms, but she recoiled. The confrontation exploded in fragments, accusations flung like shards of glass. She turned her fury first on William. He pretends to care about the crown while he stabs his father in the back. All that talk of duty, and he chooses her over us. Then the venom swung toward Anne, and the princess royal, the one who lectures everyone on loyalty, she sat there and orchestrated it. She's always hated me. Always. This was her revenge for every headline she ever blamed on me. Charles stood silent under the onslaught, face ashen, the weight of his children's rejection pressing down harder than any public scandal ever had. He murmured apologies, promises to fix it, but each word sounded hollow even to him. Camilla's rage finally sharpened into something colder, more dangerous. She wiped her face with trembling hands and fixed him with a stare that carried no warmth left. I waited. I endured. I changed everything they demanded. And they still see me as the intruder. Her voice dropped to a lethal whisper. If they think this ends here, they're wrong. I will protect what is mine at any cost. They want to push me out? I'll make sure the whole world watches them try. The vow hung between them, heavy with intent. She wasn't threatening scandal for scandal's sake. This was survival, the desperate instinct of someone who had clawed her way to the edge of belonging only to be shoved back. The emotional toll crushed her anew, the old wound of being the outsider reopened, raw and bleeding. She had believed Charles's love would be enough to bridge the gap. Now even that felt fragile. While Camilla plotted her next move, the palace walls were already cracking under the weight of the vote. Within hours, the vote leaked. Front pages screamed William turns on father. Hashtags exploded. Insiders revealed Charles' frantic damage control calls, William's rare public silence, and the terrifying internal poll showing the monarchy's approval crashing overnight. What desperate threats were made to suppress the story? How did Anne defend her stance in private? The family that once closed ranks now stood divided in front of the entire world. The breach came from inside the circle, someone in that sealed 2 a.m. Room, someone who could no longer stomach the secrecy, fed the bare-bones details to a trusted journalist at one of the major broadsheets. By dawn, the story was everywhere. The razor-thin defeat, the names, the stakes. Tabloids ran screaming banners, television panels dissected every possible motive in real time. Social media ignited like dry tinder, hashtag royal split trending globally within minutes. Memes clashing with furious threads accusing William of disloyalty, others hailing Anne as the last true guardian of tradition. The speed was merciless. Charles's private office turned into a war room before sunrise. He placed call after call pleading with editors, leaning on long-standing relationships, even authorizing veiled legal warnings that bordered on outright threats. Kill the story or face consequences that could stretch far beyond libel courts. Yet the genie was out. No retraction could rewind the clock. Senior advisors huddled over emergency polling data that arrived in brutal waves. Public approval of the monarchy had plunged 11 points overnight, the steepest single drop recorded in decades. Younger demographics turned especially vicious, branding the institution outdated, divided, irrelevant. The numbers didn't lie, the crown's carefully cultivated aura of unity had shattered, and the shards were cutting deep. William chose silence, a tactic as deliberate as it was agonizing. No statement, no carefully worded tweet, no appearance to steady the ship. Insiders say he spent those first hours staring at drafts he never sent, each one torn between defending his father and standing by the principle that had forced his hand. The conflict ate at him, publicly mute, while the world judged him a traitor to his own blood. Catherine stayed close, shielding him from the worst of the digital storm. But even she couldn't block the ache of knowing every headline drove another wedge into a family already fractured. Anne, by contrast, refused to vanish. In private briefings with her most trusted circle, she defended her position with unyielding clarity. I did not vote against my brother. I voted against turning the crown into a personal fiefdom. If silence means complicity, then speak I will. Her words carried the weight of someone who had spent a lifetime in the background, only to step forward when the institution itself hung in the balance. No apology, no softening, just iron resolve wrapped in duty. The media frenzy fed on itself, pundits clashing on every channel, historians dragged into studios to declare this the gravest internal crisis since the abdication, royal correspondence breathlessly predicting everything from quiet reconciliation to full-blown constitutional upheaval. Charles watched it all unfold from behind drawn curtains, the man who had waited so long to lead now watching his reign teeter on the edge of public contempt. Every frantic effort to contain the story only fueled the narrative. Cover-up, desperation, weakness. The approval numbers kept falling. Advisors whispered the unthinkable how long before sponsors pulled back, before foreign tours were quietly cancelled, before the question everyone feared was asked aloud. Is the monarchy still fit for purpose? The headlines burned bright, but the deepest scars were still forming behind closed doors. Behind the screaming headlines, 3 lives lay in ruins. Charles stares at old family photos with regret he cannot voice. William grapples with guilt that keeps him awake. Anne carries the weight of her defiance like armor. What private regrets haunt each of them? What small gestures of love are now lost forever? Insiders describe the quiet morning and the one final letter that arrived too late. The vote that promised stability had delivered only permanent fracture. In the dim lamplight of his private study, Charles sat alone for hours, fingers tracing the edges of faded photographs William as a boy on his shoulders at Balmoral. The two of them laughing over shared secrets after Diana's funeral. The quiet pride in his son's eyes the day he became a father. Himself. Every image now felt like an accusation. He had built this plan for Camilla out of love and long-delayed justice, yet in doing so he had lost the one person whose loyalty he had never questioned. The morning was silent and merciless, no tears, just a hollow ache that widened with each passing night. He replayed the council meeting endlessly, wondering how he had failed to see the fracture coming, how the son he raised to honor duty had chosen duty over him. The regret ran deeper than any public scandal. It was the private knowledge that certain bridges, once burned in the name of the crown, could never be rebuilt. Small gestures that once came so easily, the late-night calls just to hear William's voice, the handwritten notes slipped into birthday cards now felt impossible, severed by the very institution that was meant to bind them. William, meanwhile, had withdrawn into a world of his own making. Adelaide Cottage grew quieter than ever, the children's laughter the only sound breaking the heavy silence. He paced the halls at night, guilt gnawing at him like something alive. Had he betrayed the father who had fought so hard to keep the family together after every storm? Or had he betrayed the future he owed his own children? The self-doubt circled endlessly, stealing sleep and appetite alike. Catherine watched helplessly as the man she loved grew distant, his eyes carrying shadows no title could erase. He replayed the vote in his mind too, but where Charles saw loss, William saw necessity, yet necessity tasted like ash. The emotional withdrawal wasn't dramatic, it was a slow retreat inward. A man who had always been the bridge now becoming the wall. Every memory of shared triumphs felt tainted, every future plan suddenly uncertain. The psychological toll settled in like winter frost, constant, invisible, chilling everything it touched. Anne remained the picture of stoic resolve in public, her back straight, her schedule unbroken. But behind the armor, the pain carved deep grooves. She had voted to save the monarchy, yet in doing so she had shattered the last fragile threads of sibling closeness. Nights found her staring into the fire at Gatcombe, replaying the confrontation, the look in Charles's eyes when William's hand rose in opposition. She told herself it was duty, nothing more, but the inner ache whispered otherwise. The defiance that had once felt righteous now carried the weight of isolation she had never sought. Lost family moments haunted them all, the easy Christmas gatherings that would never feel the same, the casual phone calls that had stopped, the birthdays where forced smiles would replace genuine warmth. Those ordinary threads of love, once taken for granted, had unraveled beyond repair. Then came the final letter, delivered by courier the morning after the leak exploded. Charles's handwriting on the envelope, formal, yet trembling, addressed to both Anne and William. It arrived too late to change anything. A quiet plea for understanding wrapped in the language of a king who had run out of time. Inside were words of sorrow, not anger, admitting the plan had been born from love, but executed in blindness. It changed nothing on paper, yet it broke something deeper inside each of them. The long-term toll was only beginning, the quiet erosion of trust that no press release could fix, the lingering sense that the family they had fought to protect now existed only in fragments. Hearts once aligned now beat in wary rhythm, each waiting for the next fracture. The silence is now permanent, but the final question remains: who will break first, and at what devastating cost? One vote. One alliance, one irreversible stand. William and Anne have drawn the line against Charles's plan for Camilla. Will the king reverse course? Will Camilla's influence survive? Will the monarchy adapt or fracture beyond repair? Insiders warn the next 90 days will decide everything. The human cost is staggering: estranged father and son, broken trust, and a crown fighting for relevance. Whatever comes next will either redefine the royal family or watch it fall in real time. The story isn't over. It has only just begun. The clock is ticking toward a reckoning no one can predict. In the coming months, every move will carry the weight of centuries. Charles may choose quiet retreat, withdrawing the proposal entirely in a bid to salvage what remains of family bonds, yet such a climb down would leave Camilla exposed, her hard-won position once again questioned by a public that never fully embraced her. He could double down instead, quietly building alliances among lesser royals, courting sympathetic courtiers, even exploring constitutional workarounds that sidestep the council altogether. Either path demands sacrifice, swallow pride to heal the rift with his son, or risk alienating the very institution he swore to protect. Camilla, meanwhile, fights her own silent war. The rage that once burned hot has cooled into calculated determination. She knows survival now means playing the long game, public grace masking private maneuvering, every appearance a reminder of her place beside the throne. Yet the scars run deep. Trust, once shattered, does not mend overnight. William and Anne stand on the other side of the divide, bound by a shared conviction that has cost them dearly. Reconciliation hovers like a distant promise, carefully worded letters, intermediaries testing the waters, perhaps a private meeting engineered under the guise of routine duties. But words alone cannot erase the memory of that 2 a.m. vote, the moment eyes met across the table and loyalty fractured. Public perception hangs in the balance. Polls already show cracks. Younger generations applaud the stand against unchecked power, while traditionalists decry division at the top. The monarchy's relevance is no longer assumed. It must be earned anew. Every tour, every engagement, every carefully staged appearance will be judged through the lens of this fracture. The contrast is stark: decades of projected unity now replaced by raw, human struggle. Success and suffering walk hand in hand. The crown endures, yet the family that wears it bleeds. The ultimate test lies ahead: loyalty versus tradition, personal affection versus institutional survival. One wrong step, and the delicate balance tips forever. Insiders whisper of a final, audacious move still in play, perhaps a public address from an unexpected voice, a revelation timed to maximum impact, or a quiet abdication threat that forces everyone back to the table. Whatever form it takes, that single act could either forge a new, more transparent era, or ignite the kind of crisis that topples dynasties. The next 90 days will reveal whether the House of Windsor bends or breaks, whether blood proves thicker than protocol, or whether protocol finally claims its price. The final chapter is still being written, and the person who holds the pen may be the one no one expects. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.